Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. Those who knew someone who went missing, what happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My cousin, who I barely knew, disappeared along with his car, leaving behind a large blood stain in his apartment. Right from the start, his roommates were suspects, but several years passed and his body was still missing. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, or America's Most Wanted, or one of those, and a tip came in giving the location of his car in a nearby river. His body was found in the trunk, and the roommates confessed and went to prison. A family friend went to a Metallica concert. During intermission, she went out to have a cigarette, and the venue wouldn't let her back in. There's footage of her walking through the parking lot, and then she wasn't seen again. They ended up finding her body a year or so later, and through DNA, connected it to another murder. Because of that DNA, they found the guy who did it. It was awful. Morgan was her name, and she was beautiful and talented, and had her whole life ahead of her. The guy I went to school with and kind of grew up around, his mom is one of my mom's best friends, went missing in 2010 on his way home. Police and search parties searched everywhere looking for him in his truck. He had to pass over a bridge to get to his house, so it should be noted that the lakes were searched by divers and dragging the lake as well. 4 years later, 2014, the water levels were very low, and someone called in saying they saw a tire sticking out of the surface of the water near the bridge he would cross to get home. It was him in his truck. At least the family got closure after 4 long, excruciating years. A friend went missing one night in June 2016 after a night out. He had an argument with his SO and wandered off on foot. Days went by, and there was no info. Found out he'd somehow been hit by a car and died. He didn't have his wallet on him, so it took a bit for them to identify his body. No one understood how his significant other wasn't with him, or what led up to him walking off in what I think was a drunken state. My brother's middle school teacher, he just didn't show up to school one day, which was very unusual. The school scrambled to find a substitute for him because they had no notice. We had a whole school meeting like 2 days later when he was officially missing, where they told us all about it. He left the house that morning as usual, according to his wife later said. He was never seen again. Many search parties were organized and people looked for months, but they never found him. He's still officially missing today. None of these are easy at all, but I think the hardest ones are when there is no closure. Painful that it would be. Just that wondering is gotta be worse, right? This was my friend's brother. He disappeared and his apartment had blood everywhere, as if from a struggle or suicide attempt. Years later, he showed up on his brother's doorstep and said he had been living as a shaman somewhere. Who knows how accurate that is? When I was a kid, a friend of mine was kidnapped by his dad. The mom got custody, and the dad just showed up one day and took him. It was devastating for everyone, especially the mom and brother. Yeah, I don't know why he only took one kid. After about 5 years of police investigations, and the mom having to change her legal name and go into hiding, they finally found him and got him back home. He was safe, but he was really quiet for a few years after he got back. I have no idea what happened during that time. What I do know is that he seems incredibly well adjusted, and has a happily married. Not me, but a poor old guy at Costco. This old guy, maybe late 60s, came up to me and said, "Jimmy," I think that's the name he said, "is that you?" I said no. His face sank. I talked to him for a bit. Apparently his adult grandson Jimmy vanished a few years before, and I looked just like him. He said the family had no idea where he is and hadn't seen him in years. He just sat up and moved away without telling anyone. The guy didn't seem like he had dementia or anything, just a grandfather looking for his grandson. This was a few years ago. I felt really bad for the guy. His heart probably got super excited, only to be broken again when I wasn't Jimmy. I eventually contacted his family because his grandfather seemed really sad about it. A neighbor's son vanished while jogging in our neighborhood. He was an avid runner, and it was unlike him not to come back on time. Days turned into a frantic search involving the entire community. Unfortunately, his body was found in a nearby river. An investigation revealed that it had been struck by a hit-and-run driver, and his body was dumped to hide the crime. The perpetrator was eventually caught, but it was a devastating loss for his family. Man, I got so many details wrong. This was 97, which feels like a decade ago. My brain deceived me. Everyone knew the neighbor took her, a young teen. Correction, she was 11, only child. The parents reported her missing immediately. They were a close family, and she wasn't one to be late to dinner. The neighbor would confess to small things related to her abduction to torture. The parents, over a couple of years, I think this was a few decades ago, they found some evidence of her on his truck, but not enough to nail him. He made a plea deal, then backed out. The parents went crazy. The mom insisting her daughter was alive because she would know if she died. They went on Oprah and other national shows to try to find anyone who could say they've seen her. The mom was certain she'd been put into an trafficking ring. The neighbor went to prison for various offenses and kept taunting the family. After a while, he said he knew where her body was, but gave false locations. They couldn't pin a murder on him. Her body was found in 2002. I worked with a young woman named Julie. She had a little girl and was in the process of splitting from her husband. She didn't show up for work one day, a no-call, no-show. She was missing from that day forward. The ex had their daughter and had logged into her Facebook to make a message about leaving town with a new boyfriend. They found her car abandoned in the parking lot. The ex went on Dr. Phil, I believe, to do a lie detector test and proclaim innocence. Even though they have never found her body, the ex was actually found guilty of her murder. Sometimes I think about her and wonder where all her earthly remains are. I hope she's found, and someday, and her family gets to bury her. My stepsister went missing about a year after my stepdad married my mom. We had just moved into our new house a couple states away from where I grew up, and I didn't know anybody. My stepsister was 3 years older and helped me make friends at school. We lived about a mile from school and walked there and back a couple days a week when my mom had to go to work early. One day, I walked across their homepage from school alone because my stepsister had basketball practice. There had been some robberies in the area, so my mom had us carry pepper spray with us. And I remember feeling weird that day. I just got home fine, and a few hours later, we hadn't heard from my stepsister, so my stepdad called the basketball coach to see if practice went late. We didn't have phones. The coach said my stepsister had left the school a couple of hours before. A few months later, after a lot of searching, her body was found in the woods near the school. There was pepper spray residue all over her skin. They never caught the person who did it, but she was killed with the rock the police found near her body. About 8 years ago, I was at a bar with my university roommate around midnight. A guy I didn't recognize comes up to my roommate. They exchange some words and give each other a big hug. Turns out they were old childhood friends. He sticks around and we shoot the shit for an hour or so. Super nice dude. Said he had to go meet some people, but if we were still up for it, he might come back to this way. We stay for a couple more hours. He never comes back, and we head home. Around 2 weeks later, my roommate finds out via Facebook he went missing that night, and they found his body dumped in a storm drain a few days later. It's still kind of surreal typing this out now, that we were maybe some of the people he talked to. They did catch the people that did it though, so that was good at least. Half-brother, he went missing after going out on the lake with a friend's boat and his girlfriend. It had started raining and storming and the boat tipped over. His girlfriend made it back to shore. He didn't. They took 2 days off to find him. They dragged the lake for his body. He was eventually found dead, washed up on the shore, somewhere along the tree line. My best friend vanished on her way to her early morning work shift several years ago. Her van was found abandoned in a field, and she was never found, despite the massive search response, and the fact her family were all cops. There's also been some rumors about her stepmother interfering with evidence, but aside from that, it's been radio silent. The FBI was auto-involved. 3 days after she vanished, I had a dream about her. She said and told me that she loved me, and since then, I've known in my heart she's dead. I miss you, Sarah. My friend and neighbor Nancy, one day she just disappeared. She had her nephew living with her, and he was integrated and found out to be innocent. I found out through her sister that she was repping. I was worried because she was diabetic. She weighed about 98 pounds, tiny thing. This was in 2007. As far as I know, she hasn't been found. All the links to her news stories are now dead links now. I don't know if it's the law or what, but my apartment complex kept her apartment waiting for her if she was to return for 4 months. I was thinking about her from time to time. One of my best friends from childhood, her boyfriend and his friend set fire to her parents' house one night with her parents tied up inside. Luckily, they escaped, but she wound up missing for weeks. So many people were slinging accusations that she was not in on it, that I and others who really knew her knew it was just possible. I feared for the worst, but hoped for the best. Eventually, they found her body in the woods. Her boyfriend had shot her point blank with a shotgun before he and his friend went to her parents' house. I'm still not clear on the entire motivation. I know he was an addict and her parents were trying to get clean and get her away from him. She was not an addict in theory. Didn't want her going down that path. And I know he had previously been abusive. But I have no idea still what the final motivation is for him to do. He and his friend are now in prison. And I typed this, and I hope they never see the light of day again. It's not someone I'm close to, but a guy I grew up with went missing from a music festival he was working at. Someone, or multiple people, told police that he abruptly told them he was going home. He didn't go home, he just disappeared. He got to the festival on bike with his bike was a couple still there. A couple of weeks later, he was identified as being a corpse found in a burned out building, that other directional iconic movie, From Home. The case remains unsolved, but it is considered a homicide. The part about this case that bothers me is that I don't know whether the "he went home" person is telling the truth. Did he abruptly decide to go home because he has something scary happened and he just didn't get that far? I just kind of feel like if things were that bad, that he'd randomly and there versus doing whatever came next that put him in the path of the people he was avoiding. Around July of 2022, an old high school classmate of mine went missing. She was a mother of 2 boys, one of them with special needs. The last known contact she had with anyone was when she told a friend of hers she was going to the store, but she never returned. The police were informed, and a report was filed. Her phone and wallet were found at her home. A boyfriend she was dating was questioned and released without any indication of wrongdoing or foul play. She's never been seen or heard from since. I was a 911 telecommunicator in moderately well-off, very low-crime county. I took the 911 call for a 16-year-old girl that went missing after she didn't come home from her morning run. About 9 hours later, I took a 911 call from the opposite side of the county. Guy claims Bahamas girl ran up to him, claiming that she had been kidnapped by a guy in a white box truck. She described him as a middle-aged white guy, and in his truck, he was making her dress up in wedding dresses, took pictures of her. He didn't physically assault her in any way, aside from the initial kidnapping. No violence. She claims he just didn't even watch her change. Just wedding. I have no idea if he was even caught.